All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode here on the Lure Lab, a part of the Serious Angler Network. And as always, I'm your host, the Captain, Andrew Full. And today we got a cool one. And I feel like I say that every week because tackle talk and lures and overall techniques is just cool. So every week is a cool one. So bear with me when I say that every week. And I just noticed it because I listened to like two of my own episodes and I was like, man, I got to stop saying that. And I said it again. So a little rant. But anyways, smallmouth fishing up here out of Buffalo has been incredible as of late and found some really big fish in the boat. And today I'm actually curious. This is going to be a technique that I have never thrown, but I'm wondering if I can actually get away and throw it for smallmouth and see if they would grab onto it. So I have AJ joining us, the owner of Horseshoe Tackle, and we're going to be talking about the stupid tube. And if you kind of mind your way around YouTube, you'll find the stupid tube comes up in a lot of popular pages and they talk about how effective it is. So I'm looking forward to diving into all of the talk here, how to rig it, the best setups, even best colors for conditions with AJ. So without further ado, let's get him on here. AJ, how's it going?
Good.
Staying nice and warm over in the Midwest, huh?
Yep. So baking a little bit, but after a while we'll be freezing again. So
baking and painting pretty much, right?
Yep.
Nice. So I know you're new here and this first time we're having you on, so I want you to tell a little bit about yourself, what you do, what Horseshoe Tackle is, and then we're going to dive into the stupid tube.
Okay. So my name's AJ Mendy. I'm out of Bellevue, Nebraska, just outside of Omaha. I custom paint crankbaits. That's what I do for the most part. But I do delve a little bit into other stuff, such as pouring tube heads and stuff and jigs. I started my tackle making, tying flies, and got into making jigs, then eventually into crankbaits. So
it's
just been doing it forever.
So awesome. But so I want to dive into the stupid tube, right? Like it's one of the most probably underutilized but extremely effective techniques out there. And I feel like you can go to basically any YouTube channel and they talk about the stupid tube and how effective it is, but yet you never see really a ton of people fish it besides like some YouTube influencers, right? And is that because it's just kept such a secret, or do people just kind of rig it up and then forget about it? And then, and why is it so effective? And why do people leave it in the tackle box?
Yeah. The tube is probably the most forgotten fish catching bait there is. I mean, across the board.
Yeah.
It goes from regular rigging with the jig head with the exposed hook, Texas rigging it. Just not a lot of people throw a tube anymore. Everyone has. Yeah. And I think the stupid tube is even the most niche version of them all, outside of maybe Carolina rigging it with an earplug in it. That old trick. But
make it float a little, basically.
Yeah. The stupid tube is the cross between like your Texas rig tube and the traditional tube head with an exposed hook. So you're getting not the direct fall that a Texas rig has. You're not quite getting the full spiral that a traditional tube has, but it does give you the gliding, which is why it's so effective as it is.
Got it. So basically, like when it's gliding, is that like rod manipulation with like slack line too to make it glide even more, or is it just glide as it falls?
It just glides as it falls. That's just how it's made. You know how a traditional tube will usually spiral. Yeah. This doesn't quite get that, but it does. It gets wide glides. It's pretty impressive to see.
Huh. And that's probably because of the way the line tie is, etc. Because you probably want, there's vertical and then horizontal, right? I think line tie is like one. Yeah, I think that's the way it is. And then you probably want like a vertical one, right? Not horizontal going across the face.
I prefer it just because I fish a lot of places with grass in it. And those horizontal line ties, they'll just rake it in,
Yeah, makes sense. Got it. So kind of like personal reflection on the stupid tube. So, like, what was the first time you ever threw it, and why did you throw it? If you can remember that, and maybe even touch on like one of your memorable fish catches with it.
You know, like I said, when I was younger, tube was something that was always around, and I watched. I saw Terry McWilliams at the Classic on Blay Lake. I think he finished second in that throwing it. So that's kind of what put it in my head. So I kind of tried it, then forgot about it for years,
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, after I was starting to pour my own jig, started throwing a tube, but it's getting snagged a lot. And I'm like, there's a better way. And, it came back to me. I'm like, oh, yeah, I've done this before. And I started making my own heads and messing with hooks to get the right action. And I mean, I didn't sell them for a long time. I just threw them myself. But where my favorite place to throw them really is in the brush piles. We don't have a ton of smallmouth, or we don't really have any smallmouth here, but I'm not too far away from smallmouth. So, but brush piles for largemouth, it'll get into places just by its gliding action, just by the way it falls, into places that you just can't cast. Then the second best place is docks, because it's probably one of the best skipping baits there is. Just because you got the weight on the inside of a small piece of plastic, it's flat, or smooth, I should say. And
So,
you can skip way back under docks.
what size heads do you recommend for like rigging the stupid tube? And if you don't mind showing, like, if I know you already have one pre-rigged, but can you show how to rig it?
Yep. So this is your head. This is a 3/16, which is probably the most popular size. I sell my heads, and this is the most popular. Quarters probably second. Then 1/8 and 5/16, they kind of ebb and flow. But I would say 3/16 or quarter are probably the most popular size, just depending on how deep you're fishing and how heavy of line you're using.
Got it.
For rigging, if I can do this in front of my face, instead of like a traditional tube where you were to stick the head in through the back, you're going to start with the hook point first. So stick that hook point down. You're going to poke it out about there so you have room for your head. Then you're going to pull that head through the tube, and you're going to flip it. Do this. So you're going to flip it around so your tube's like this. And then you're going to bend that tube at like a 90-degree angle and just poke it through.
Now, how soft, like, do you want a more durable tube when you're using this, or do you want like a tender tube, something that just falls apart easily?
That comes down to preference. The tougher tubes, I think they glide a little bit better, but I think your hookup ratio, just like with a Texas rig tube, is, you got to get through that plastic. So I tend to use a softer tube. I like the big bite tubes and the coffee tubes for the most part.
Great tubes.
Yeah.
Staples.
I'm a fan of soft tubes. And when I tear them up, because they do get torn up, usually like before a tournament, if I know I'm going to be throwing it, I'll rig up a half dozen and put them in the bag with the head on, or the head already in
smart.
it.
That's a great piece of advice. So,
saves you a ton of time.
Absolutely. So, what would you say are the best conditions to throw it? Like bright sun, calm, or like when would you say you have the most confidence of throwing this stupid tube?
Personally, I like throwing it when it's really tough. When, especially when people are throwing a lot of other jigs and Texas rigs around stuff, I think that tube, that stupid tube, just gives them a little more subtle action, something they don't see very often.
Right.
I've caught them in pretty much any kind of condition. It works year round too, which is nice, just like any tube does, you know. But personally, when it's tough is my favorite time to throw it.
Love it. Do you have any like confidence colors or like size of tubes that you want to throw?
You know, for me, I've gone to trying to keep everything simple, like green pumpkins, black and blues. But for
Says the
tubes,
painter.
yeah, says the painter. That comes from me deciding that I like this plastic and buying 5 packs in every color. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when it comes to tubes, I don't know why I do not throw straight green pumpkin. I'll throw like the Big Bites tilapia or tilapia magic. You know, anything to mimic the bait fish. A lot of stuff. This is like a green pumpkin gold.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why, but for that, I always like having that flake in there for tubes.
Just something a
But
little bit different. I'm pretty much the same way with smallmouth. Like I want like gaudy, like natural base color, but like gaudy flake in it, and just something completely different from what other people are throwing. And it just tends to always get bigger bites. You don't get many bites on it, but when you get one, they're usually big ones.
yeah,
And I don't know why. There's no science behind it. It's just the confidence that I have, you know?
yep, that's how I am too.
So what is like the best size tube? Is it like a 3.5? Is it 2 3/4? 4 inch?
3.5 is my favorite. 4 inch works. But when you get into those 4 inch tubes, like I said, the bigger gap. I mean, you can still get that hook through, but I prefer the 3.5. Like I said, I'm throwing it usually when it's tougher, so having that smaller profile, I think, is a little bit better. I think it's just a confidence thing. I think if you're like throwing a 4 inch tube, do it. I haven't been able to find a hook personally to get into the smaller tubes, and I've been working on it for a while. I've bought so many hooks that just sit there now because they don't work. They're not big enough, or they're too big. It's just because I really want to get that small tube.
You might have to design your own hook there.
Yeah, that's a lot of quantity.
Yeah, that's true. So what is like the setup that you throw the stupid tube on, AJ?
For me personally, most of the time I'm throwing it on the same rod I'm throwing a finesse jig on. So something for me, I'm 6'5", so I throw a 7.3 medium heavy. I can skip that easily. Throwing it on 12 to 15, depending on the cover. But usually it's that bigger rod. I've thrown them a lot on a spinning rod too. If I have to go lighter than 12, everything's just on a spinning rod.
Right.
You know?
Makes sense.
I grew up in the Midwest, so spinning rod's not foreign to me. That's something that I'm very comfortable using.
Well, if our listeners pay attention to the Elite Series, I think casting rods are soon to become like the foreign objects to a lot of anglers. So it's kind of funny to see like the way tournament fishing is progressing and changing throughout like over the last like 4 to 5 years. It's like more spinning rods, less casting gear, and I'm the exact opposite. I'm like, give me more casting gear. I want to go actually crack a fish.
Yeah, this year I've like made a focus to try to throw bigger baits because I'll get a little too quick on that drop, too quick to pull out the drop shot.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's a bite getter, especially if you're like,
yep,
you didn't have time to practice and you're at a lake and you're like, this is the areas I know they should be. Let me instantly go to what I know they will bite instead of trying to make them bite or react to something else. So it makes sense.
yeah,
100%. I can't drop shot anymore unless I'm smallmouth fishing. It drives me insane. I'm like, no, why am I doing this? I put it down instantly. And it always gets you a key bite or two in a tournament too. And I'm like, nope, not doing it. I don't care. I'll go down in flames.
yeah. We had a little club tournament yesterday, and had most of my fish were flipping a big weight in pads. Then I caught a 4.5 on a drop shot. So I was like, that's my best fish was on the drop shot after
Of course.
throwing the big rod all day.
Everyone asks, what'd you catch on? You're like, the big rod.
Yep.
Yeah. I love it. So, just a couple more questions here, and then I'll kind of let you take the floor if there's anything else that you think our listeners should know about the stupid tube. But the first thing I want to know is like, what are some common mistakes that anglers make when they are attempting to fish a stupid tube? And then following that up, also give a piece or two of advice to our listeners on how they can effectively fish the stupid tube.
Yeah, I would say the most common mistake is for me, I don't drag it. Like, I don't, when it comes to the stupid tube, I don't drag it. I'm hopping it all the time because I want that falling action.
Yeah.
When I'm in brush piles, I try to pop it. If I know I'm free, I'll try to pop it up high and get it to, like I said, it'll snake back down into places where you can't just cast into. An example of this was I was fishing the Bass Nation Championship on the Ouachita River, and I was flipping it into like the root balls of cypress trees,
Mhm.
and like there were places that you knew that you couldn't flip into just because of the way the roots would be laying, and it would swim down. I got a lot of bites doing that. I mean, it was probably my best bait.
Sneaky.
Yeah, which there was also several fish that I couldn't get back out of there because they got into places that you can't cast.
It like gets in between the root balls and they bite it on the backside. You're like, oh yeah, that's not good.
But hey, you got to get the bite first, right?
Absolutely.
So
always get the bite first and figure out how to land them later. And sometimes it just doesn't work. But yeah, you have to get bit to catch them. So I agree.
Yeah. So when it comes to mistakes, I mean, you can throw it anywhere. You can throw it in grass. It's not the best in like here in Nebraska, we got a lot of real stringy pondweed. It's not the best for that because it just tears that weed. But for like heavy cattails and stuff, it'll fish through that. I flipped it on the edge of lily pads too. That's a good place for it because it has that slower fall.
Yeah, probably backslides by the roots and stuff too, instead of making a bunch of commotion. I like that.
Instead of like the big punch and weight and stuff. Then like in cold water, I'll rip this thing too to get the reaction bites. So I'll let it sit there, then I'll rip it real quick, let it fall like you would for smallmouth, but I'm doing it for largemouth in 45-degree water.
You're just cracking a stupid tube.
Yeah.
And like offshore, like casting to them like 120, 150 feet and just pop.
Yep, just like on points and stuff. Yep.
Love it.
And I've had time, like I did it and I was catching them doing that. And I was like, I'm going to just see. And I started dragging it and I couldn't get the bites dragging it. So it was all reaction. So that's another place. And not saying you couldn't do that with an exposed hook tube, but for me,
the action's going to be different though too.
Yeah.
See, when I crack an exposed hook tube, I'm not even so much hopping it. I'm shaking it on slack line in place and making it kind of just quiver, right? Like that's what I think of when I'm cracking a tube in cold water. So to really actually pop it on casting gear, I'm assuming like that sounds like fun. Sign me up for that.
Yeah. It's kind of a sneaky little thing that I figured out. And like, it doesn't always work, but when it works, they'll get on it.
Yeah, makes sense. I like that. Yeah. So is there, AJ, before we wrap up here, is there anything else that you think people should know about the stupid tube that we may have missed?
It's probably going to be one of your most weedless baits you can throw just because it is so slender and narrow. Like I said, you could throw it into that stuff, like cypress roots and stuff. Not saying you're not going to lose them. You're going to because you're throwing it into the nastiest stuff, but you can really fish it in places that a lot of other things can't go into. I think actually one of the closest things to it's like the cover scat. You know, the way it doesn't get the same fall, but the way it moves, the way kind of the shape of it,
like the Yamatanuki, the cover scat, any of the poop baits.
Yep. How they can get through. I mean, that's why they were made, to get into the nastiest stuff and the nasty rock on BWA and all that. It's the same way. You can throw this into rocks, real snaggy rocks. I mean, you're still going to lose them, but it does a lot better than a lot of other baits. So I had a tournament down in Truman in Missouri, and I was actually throwing them in the treetops in 20 feet of water, just letting them, because the fish were suspended in the first 5 feet, and just throwing them into big, nasty cedar trees and swimming around, catching them like that too. So
it could have been a nightmare getting them out of those trees, though.
No, well, You figure it out.
Yeah.
When they're in the top, at least they try to dive down. It's not like in a shallow brush pile where they're into the knots and stuff.
Oh, yeah, where they eat it and they run 50 feet the other way, and you're like, oh, great.
Yeah. And sometimes when they're schooled up in there, they'll actually swim out of the tree, which was nice.
Yeah.
So,
although, unfortunately, sometimes I'll bring all the other ones out and you have to wait for them to reset. But, yeah. Like, where'd my friend go?
yep. And that's another sneaky little thing that I do is throw it in shad colors, especially in the fall on those shad lakes.
Yeah, I can see that working really good in the spring, too.
Yeah. It has that dying action. So I don't be afraid to throw the whites and stuff like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And now I really need to start experimenting with this. Thanks. Just give me another thing. So I'm gonna have to head over. So real quick too, like tell everyone like where your website is, like how to reach you, and if they want to pick up some stupid tube heads and check out all your custom baits, throw that in there, and then it'll all be linked down below as well.
Okay. So it's my website's horseshoetackle.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Horseshoe Custom or Horseshoe Custom Tackle on Facebook. Then Instagram and TikTok are Horseshoe Tackle. So the website's the best place to find the stuff. If you want to contact me, it's Instagram's probably the best way. It's the best way I see the messages.
Perfect.
So, yep. Then they're under the weedless tube head, and I sell them. They're $4 for a 7-pack of the heads. So then I carry them in 1/8, 3/16, quarter, and 5/16.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to get some of those myself to start experimenting. I got all kinds of tubes. You better believe that one.
Yeah,
they just kind of sit there at this point. So, like this year, I'm like, how am I going to catch these fish? That's not a tube or a drop shot or a Ned rig. And I started jig head minnowing fish out on Erie. Nobody I'm like, I don't think there's too many people doing it. And a lot of people just hang up and down. I think I'm one of the very few people that are actually casting to them in like 50 foot of water, trying to make them come up and bite it. Not many do, but when they do, they're good ones. So it's like, just I get every time I have a free second or my clients are like, fish with us. That's what I do is I mess around with the jig head minnow just to see how I can perfect it. That's a hard one. I'll tell you that. It's a tricky little bugger. So many different baits, and some days they only want one style bait. Other days it doesn't matter. They'll eat all of them. And it's just like, how do I get this recipe right? So, but thanks, AJ, for coming on. I greatly appreciate it. I know I messaged you a long time ago about coming on and talking about how to paint baits and et cetera. Maybe we can do an episode on that in the future if you're up for it. But
absolutely.
I greatly appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. And let us know if there's anything you need from us.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, of course. We'll chat soon. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode here on the Lure Lab. The tubes that we mentioned, the Big Bite Baits, Strike King, and a couple other ones that I think will work will be all linked down below in the description. Type in Serious 10 at checkout and you save 10%. Also, Horseshoe Custom Tackle. The website will be down in the description if you want to go over there and check out AJ's website and check out all the custom painted baits and jig heads and jigs that he makes over there. You won't regret it. But thanks for tuning in. If you're new here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you leave a comment if you've ever thrown the stupid tube before. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform and it allows you to leave a review, please do so. It allows the Lure Lab to be seen by more people who love bass fishing every week. And we will see you all next Saturday.